I'm Shulin, and welcome to After the Bar. We often hear about the success of trailblazers in and outside of law. What we don't have access to is their inspiring backstories, their untold sacrifices, and what they did to get them there. This podcast brings you stories from some of the most accomplished lawyers, former lawyers, and other movers and shakers in the legal industry from around the world. As a former lawyer myself, I've spoken with thousands of lawyers over the years as a legal recruiter. After the Bar aims to share some of these conversations with you, giving all of us a glimpse into their world. To receive updates on new episodes, just search Shulin Lee on LinkedIn and follow me. So today we have the Deputy General Counsel of Grab, John Cordova, here today to share with us about his journey. He's a true global citizen. He's a Thai Chinese, Filipino who grew up in Singapore and Italy and worked in London, Bangkok, Hong Kong, and now Singapore. So John and we've known each other for well over 10 years now. And when I first met him, he was new to Singapore and freshly relocated from Clifford Chance in Bangkok. So in 2017, almost 5 years ago, John joined Grab at the height of the ride-share war between Grab and Uber. And he was lawyer number 12 of a very lean Grab legal team. The Grab legal team today, it now has 60 plus lawyers. So for those of you who don't know about Grab, Grab is known as the Southeast Asian everyday super app, and it has recently been listed on Nasdaq. John heads up Grab's transactions legal team and has been an integral part of Grab's journey to listing. So a little bit more about John. John started his career in the UK with not one, but two Magic Circle law firms. He worked with them for more than 10 years across a number of jurisdictions: London, Singapore, Bangkok, and Hong Kong. He was also a partner with one of the big four local law firms here in Singapore, Raja and Tan, where he successfully grew their ASEAN platform. Thank you so much, John, for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time. And with all our episodes, John, we always start right at the beginning. So let's take you back to the beginning of your journey as a lawyer. So when you were still in law school, John, did you have an idea of the type of lawyer you'd be? Did you set out to be a corporate finance, transactions lawyer? Did you even anticipate that you'll travel around the world and practice law?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me here, Shulin. I think I probably imagined that I would be a corporate lawyer. And I was influenced in part by, the US legal kind of shows that we were all watching at the time. And my father was a lawyer before he turned to become a diplomat, but he was a labor lawyer. But yeah, I think it would have, corporate lawyer.
Oh, corporate lawyer, I see. So life turned out the way you anticipated it too, right? So when you were in law school, you really thought, okay, I want to be one of those corporate lawyers. What were some of the dramas you were watching?
Oh, Ally McBeal was one.
My favorite.
And so with US, I mean, using her and her colleagues as an example, it was a US setting.
Yes.
And as with Suits today, you see the corporate lawyer doing a mix of corporate work and also court work, which in reality for as a solicitor, which I am, is not quite the case. You generally just tend to kind of focus more on delivering to your corporate clients' needs. And if ever you need to go to court, you kind of engage your litigators. But yeah, just taking it back, if I may, taking it back to the beginning. So I guess my career, kicked off with a combination of luck and luck creation. And to me, life is a bit like a kind of winning lottery tickets lottery prizes. And you're born with, the skill sets you have and the parents you have. So that's kind of the first victory in a way, and the chance to play. And then As a lawyer or someone aspiring to be a practitioner, what's the big jackpot? It's the training contract. And so that jackpot for me was obtained through relationship building at a very, very early stage. Right when I was still in college, I looked around and asked myself who might be able to guide me and support me and help me get that training contract, which is, as we all know, is so competitive.
Yes,
it's
highly coveted.
So difficult to get. And the process for me was relationship building.
Right. And was this when you say college, you mean like even before law school or in law school?
More in law school. I was already thinking about, how to get to that end point, which is the training contract. Yeah. And so it's like fundraise. You kind of tap friends and family, right? Friends and family. And through an aunt of mine, I kind of secured an internship legal assistant role with a relatively prominent local Thai firm called Nopodon and Kaisi. And why them, right? And they were best friends with Clifford Chance. And so that was my angle. And so I said after 6 months, I said, Nopodon, I'd love an opportunity to be interned at CC. Can you call your friends? And so he did me a huge favor. I was in London for like 6 weeks, relatively short. And I did two things. I applied for a training contract with Clifford Chance, and just in case things didn't go well as anticipated, my plan B was Freshfields. So as things worked out, funny enough, Clifford Chance said no, and Freshfields said yes. So that was my first kind of jackpot win,
lottery ticket,
career-wise. And then obviously as my career kind of progressed and as I matured as a lawyer, the other thing you need, a bit digressing, but super important, is a supportive partner and super understanding spouse. So that's the second jackpot, because you kind of, the hours are crazy.
Yes.
You are always traveling, you're always in the office. And without that supportiveness from your partner or spouse, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
And so there you go. So that's the beginning. That was my beginning.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that, because, you summarized it very well. It's like a lottery ticket. Life is like a lottery ticket. You hit a couple of jackpots with your wife. If she's listening, I'm sure she love you mentioning that. And then, with Freshfields, Clifford Chance, and I like how you said fundraising, friends and family, which, well, I guess not everyone has that access. But let's talk a little bit more about you practicing all over the world, because you started with Freshfields, and I did my research. So you were in Bangkok, London, Singapore, and even Hong Kong. How did that come about? It sounds like a dream come true for many lawyers out there. Like, as a young lawyer, you can travel and you can work. Yes. So was that deliberate also? Like, did you strategize to get that?
It was deliberate. Moving from the West, London, back to Asia was definitely very deliberate. And obviously, that's also why Freshfields gave me that chance in the first place. Because it's so competitive, the training contracts, one thing that I knew kind of played to my advantage was I stood out because I was rather ASEAN as a person. I studied in Singapore. I speak Thai. My father's Filipino. So, and I think at that point in time, Freshfields, along with a couple of other Magic Circle firms, a couple of other US firms, were building their presence in Southeast Asia. So and in Asia, North Asia for that matter. So I knew that it was only a matter of time that I would be moving or asked to move back from London to Asia. So after 2 years post qualification, so 4 years with Freshfields on Fleet Street, number 65, I still remember the address. I asked to kind of, embark on my Asian legal journey a little bit sooner than I thought. I probably would, in hindsight, like to stay a little bit longer in London. But anyway, I moved back to Bangkok, and then Hong Kong, Singapore was a very natural kind of circuit.
And from Clifford Chance, because then you moved to Clifford Chance Bangkok.
Yes.
And so it was about 15 or 16 years of private practice. And then you moved to Singapore, where we first met.
Yes.
Into your first foray in-house. And that's a big leap of faith, because not only do you move countries, you left the safe confines of private practice, what you've known for 15, 16 years,
Yes.
into the unknown, into the world of in-house. To make that move from practice to in-house, and I know we've had many discussions about that, and I'm very grateful that you did move here. That's how we met. But what were your considerations back then? Because you were on track to make partner, for sure, right? In the Magic Circle firm. Was there a single event or trigger that prompted you to decide, okay, I'm gonna make that move and take that plunge?
Yeah, I'll start off with a philosophical kind of angle first. So you only live once.
Yes.
And yes, had I stuck to it, I was off counsel then. The track was quite clear. You had to kind of bring in the billables, the numbers, and kind of develop your relationships, and you probably would get there. That partnership pinnacle. But I was also extremely curious, having worked for the bankers and the companies, extremely curious as to what drove them to do what they did. And is there more to life outside of the cocoon of a law firm? You can get really comfortable. And the repetitiveness wasn't an issue, because blended into the familiarity of how you execute deals were the clients. No two clients are ever the same, and no two deals are ever the same. So there's always a variety in practice. But I was extremely intellectually and professionally curious to find out what people did, what drove them to do what they do outside of a law firm. And so I started to look, and thankfully, our paths crossed.
Yes.
And you placed me in a super unique firm, investment firm, where I met fantastic people. So had I not done that, I wouldn't be where I am today, because moving from Clifford Chance to Richard Chandler was, a real kind of stepping stone to then ending up at Rajan Tan, then Rising Tide, then at Grab. And it was scripted, it was scripted by the heavens. It was all meant to be. But I think for me is you've got to take that leap of faith.
Yes.
If and some people are maybe less risk averse than I am, but I am very much a risk taker.
Completely. In fact, most lawyers are by nature risk averse. You are the opposite. Because, so let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah.
Because after your first role in-house, you went back into practice, which is Raja and Tan.
Yes.
And obviously you're very international, very ASEAN. And were you recruited to spearhead their drive to expand into ASEAN, right? You're overseeing its expansion into, I'll name the countries for you so you don't have to name them: Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam. So to create the largest law firm in Southeast Asia, which they are now today. So how was that like? Can you share, some experiences that struck a chord with you?
Yeah. So let me just touch on how Rajan Tan
Yeah.
came about. So again, one of the themes in my career development journey is building relationships, as I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And my conversation with Eng Beng, who was then managing partner, and Patrick Ang, deputy, and a good buddy of mine, Danny Ong, who is now a senior litigator at Rajan Tan. My conversations with them started when I was with Clifford Chance in Bangkok. And they shared with me that they wanted to grow their footprint, and we were already talking.
Yeah.
And then we met, and then I said, I just kind of punted it, and I did Richard Chandler first. But the conversations continued, and then it was a very seamless transition from Richard Chandler to Rajan Tan.
Yes.
And yes, my one of my core objectives in joining was KPIs was to help them grow the footprint, and that was on the back of the relationships that I built at Freshfields and Clifford Chance around the region with regional law firms in the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, all the countries you mentioned. And then obviously it was a series of M&As that we did for R&T. So the role is very much, if you like, an in-house GC M&A practitioner executing these joint ventures for Rajan Tan.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
In 2017, you joined Grab.
Yep.
You became a grabber. That's what they call,
Yep.
right? Grabber. And I remember you were one of the first, you were the number 12, right?
Yes.
Number 12 legal hire. And now you guys have 60 over lawyers, which is insane in this market within such a short time frame.
Yeah.
Because you joined in 2017, which is just under 5 years ago.
Yes.
And
4.5.
yes,
Yeah.
and earlier on, when I introduced you, I mentioned that when you joined, Uber and Grab were both in the market, and there was this war, right? And back then, a lot of people had their money on Uber. Grab was the underdog. So, in fact, just talking about that gave me goosebumps because I thought that Grab was just like a local company, but to see it rise so quickly, and congratulations on the recent listing
Thank you.
on the
Yeah.
NASDAQ, and so let's go back to you. So to me, I think you've single-handedly grown the legal transactions team to what it is today. And they say, I say too, that people management is one of the hardest things for anyone, even more so a lawyer. Because as you mentioned, lawyers are not so good with certain things, but are very good at other things, right? So the skill set doesn't come naturally. So how did you manage it all? You grew a team. And actually, can you share with us how was it like to be one of the first few legal grabbers?
Yeah, there's quite a lot in that, in
There's a
that
lot.
question.
Yes.
Maybe I'll start with the risk.
Yes.
In terms of career moves, leaving a much more institutionalized, private equity kind of private practice to join a 5-year-old company, startup-y, was probably the biggest gamble I took career-wise. But fast forward 4.5 years, it's been the most rewarding professionally and personally. Professionally, in terms of the deals that I've done, mega deals, fundraise. In the span of, I'd say, maybe just under 18 months, in one fundraise round, we raised around $16 million, which I think is the new record for an ASEAN private company in terms of fundraise amounts.
When was this?
This was our series H. Yeah. So and it was 2018, 19.
Yes. So quite early on in the journey.
After our Uber transaction.
Yeah.
And speaking of another mega deal, the Uber Grab deal was huge. As far as any M&A deal is concerned. It was definitely groundbreaking for Grab. It kind of was the fuel to the rocket ship that kind of propelled us forward from a revenue perspective. And just executing to that deal, thinking back, was mind-blowing. Then the regulatory issues.
Competition law.
Overnight, I became, I had to understand, antitrust laws.
Yes.
The sheer size and scale of that deal is still kind of very, very vivid in my mind. And then partnerships with Forge, across the region. There's so many, and probably wrong to kind of highlight or identify any one. So that was risk reward paid off, fortunately for me. In terms of building the team, from a kind of big picture perspective, Grab grew exponentially. Year on year, we doubled in size as a company. So naturally, naturally, the legal team also doubled in size. It wasn't planned that way, but if you look at the math, we grew from 12 to 60 over 4 years. So roughly, we double in size every year. And growing the corporate finance legal team became a necessity just because the sheer number of deals we were dealing with.
And also, if I can add, I remember you said the hours were insane. It was worse than
Yes,
private practice.
the hours were crazy.
Yes.
My very supportive partner
Yes.
was on the verge of not supporting me. I have to say, because I was just coming home. I had joined, and my first 3 months, I was coming home at 3 in the morning, something like that.
Every day.
Yeah.
My gosh.
And it was easy to do in some ways because I was working alongside extremely talented colleagues,
Yes.
and also extremely kind of gifted partners.
Yes, because you
everywhere.
work very closely with former investment bankers, right? Who
Yes.
have joined on the corporate finance team.
Yes, the deal team is made up of a mix of investment bankers, a mix of advisors,
Yep.
and while they're extremely talented, the beauty is it's extremely collegiate. No one
Yes.
takes himself or herself too
Yes.
seriously, and it was fun. It was a very
Yes.
fun environment to work. And
So much fun that every day 3 a.m. felt like it was fine.
well, that said, there's just always 2 people left in the office. It was just the lawyers and maybe one of the bankers, the
Yes.
junior ones. But the mission was very clear. We in some ways we needed the money because we were burning. I mean, when I first joined, I was on the Series G,
Yes.
and the war with Uber was at its peak. So we were burning, they were burning, and we needed money. So had we not raised the Series G funds, I might not be here talking about Grab.
But what was the mission? You said the mission was very clear. So the mission, as in the mission was to absorb Uber.
Well, within the corporate finance team, the mission was clear, which was raise funds, and
okay.
secondly, how to grow the business and how to defeat the likes of Uber,
I
right?
see.
So, but defeating Uber was a Grab-wide
Amazing.
objective,
Yes.
and with Anthony kind of leading the charge, he is probably one of the most aggressive, hands-on leaders I've ever worked for. And so it all made sense for us to kind of work that way when
Yes.
we had to.
Yep.
So
we're talking about the expansion of your legal team.
Yes.
And I just chimed in to say that I remember you saying the hours were
Yes.
even more intense than
And that's why I
Freshfields.
called you because
Yes.
with your help, I was able to grow the team. And
thank you.
thanks to your help, we found
you.
a good mix of very technical minded lawyers and also commercially minded lawyers. So
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's incredible to see Grab's journey because no one would have thought this was possible 4 or 5 years ago when we first downloaded Grab as an app.
Yes.
It's just a taxi service, right? Now I use Grab Pay honestly for almost everything. I want my Grab points.
Sure.
So now that Grab's listed, what's next for the legal team, right? Is it still at 3 a.m. nights?
Not anymore. I think the focus will be on quality, on delivering, outserving our internal and external clients' expectations. And with our size, as we grow in size and as a listed company, we are much more accountable and responsible to a wider group of stakeholders. So I think the legal team's role and objective going forward is to make sure that we deliver to our stakeholders' expectations. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of training, education.
Yes.
Building
Yes.
the team.
Yes, it's so different now from before. I mean, I can only imagine that the direction will obviously evolve as the
Yes.
organization grows bigger.
It feels like a medium-sized law firm, right, with 60 lawyers
Yes,
spread
actually,
out
that's
across
right.
8 countries. It is a pretty sophisticated setup.
Yes. And again, within a record period of time, I think I will have to emphasize, because 60 lawyers, 8 countries within 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, John, can you tell us more about your philosophy in being a transactions lawyer? Because you've been a transactions lawyer all your career. How many years has it been now?
Wow.
Because you look very young.
Probably more than 15, let's say.
More than 15, for sure, more than 15.
We give you a range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you started off when, the first question we asked was about you wanting to be a corporate lawyer.
Yes.
And then you have been a corporate lawyer in various, and you've worn different hats, and now that, you're the deputy general counsel of the legal team for Grab, has your philosophy changed? What's your philosophy today
Yeah.
as an M&A lawyer?
I think if I learned anything from kind of working alongside the corporate finance team, it's understanding the commercial needs behind and objectives behind a deal. And once you truly understand why we're doing this M&A deal or why we're doing this joint venture from a company perspective, then it helps me identify the must-haves for the deal and then the nice-to-haves, and from there, I can then optimize for closing the deal, and then for speed. The one thing, and with that in mind, then you kind of avoid deal fatigue, because I've been on deals, and yes, even at Grab, where as hard as we try to focus on the commercial objectives,
Yes.
The reality is when there are many people sitting around a table and many stakeholders, it's never as easy as it is to close a deal. But that further emphasizes why you've got to keep things simple on your side of the fence, which is, what do you want out of the relationship, out of a deal? And then kind of chip away at those things. Otherwise, you get completely lost.
Yes. And I mean, when you said that there are many people at the table and then there are negotiations, a lot of times I hear it's a lot of egos, right? There are a lot of egos at the table, basically. And do you have any tips on how to successfully negotiate, or maybe you shouldn't be giving away your trade secret, but
Happy to share.
Yeah.
Happy to share. So it's a good point. I think it's a win-win kind of mentality
Yes.
in some ways.
Yes.
It depends on what book you're reading on that day, but
Yes.
there are two schools of thought. Well, one is try to get to win-win where everyone walks away happy,
yeah.
which must be true. Otherwise, you won't be able to close a deal.
Yes.
And two, knowing when not to give in, not to kind of split the difference. And that's where to my earlier point, you've got to have absolute clarity on what you want out of a deal. And then it's easier to negotiate because you can trade more effectively.
Yeah, trade more effectively. It's difficult for me to imagine that. I mean, I've not been a practicing lawyer for many years, because both sides, they want what's best for them, right?
Yes.
So sometimes I can only imagine that it might take days, because sometimes I hear of lawyers like they camp out at their office, it's like an all-nighter, like no one can reach like an agreement on certain things. Has that happened to you before?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Especially, give you one example.
Yeah.
If you're trying to close a deal, a joint venture where there are more than just 2 joint venture partners, and if there's 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
try to avoid deals like that, because there are too many cooks. And trying to draft a JV agreement with 5 partners, all with similar size egos, is tough.
Yes.
In hindsight, sometimes giving just to close the deal, giving up certain positions just to close a deal in the longer term makes a lot of sense. Because the synergies that come out from that deal to Grab far outweighs, some of the positional things we fight about a lot in the heat of the moment. So fortunately for some of the deals where we kind of again stuck to our guns and optimized to close, fast forward 2-3 years, the joint venture itself is paying dividends, even though we lost a position on a call option point or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like picking your battles, right?
Yes.
Like not lose sight of the big picture.
Yes.
Because oftentimes, sometimes we get so caught up in certain things, we forget that, hey, it's a joint venture. And you know what? We want to have goodwill from the start.
Yeah.
It doesn't bode well if like we're nitpicking. Okay, so John, like let's talk a little bit about you living and working in so many countries. Can you tell me which is your favorite country to be a lawyer? Because you've practiced in many different jurisdictions.
That's a tough one. Because the world is shrinking.
Yes.
Given technology.
Yeah.
So I could be working from a execution perspective, it doesn't really matter where I am.
Yep.
Be it Bangkok, Singapore, or Hong Kong, or New York. So it just maybe comes, the way I'm thinking about your question is, where would I prefer to live?
Okay.
And that's also, Singapore is great. New York is great too, So yeah, I know I just came back from New York, so I'm a little bit smitten by New York City. Yeah.
Okay. And what's one piece of advice you'd give to maybe say a junior or mid-career lawyer thinking of moving countries to work? Because you've done that a lot.
I think if you are given the opportunity to work in a different country,
yes,
you should take it. Because it adds to perspective, and perspective then helps you become a better problem solver, and you therefore deliver more value to your clients. It just makes you a more complete person.
Yes. And when you moved from Bangkok to Singapore, were you already married? Or
yes, I was.
you already married? Okay.
No, I wasn't. Sorry.
Oh, not yet.
You're gonna get me into trouble here. I was happily, we were a couple for many years.
Yes.
But we got married after I moved.
After.
Yeah, shortly after I moved, actually.
Yeah. Because oftentimes when, and maybe it's not the same for you because you've moved many times, different countries at different stages in your life. But a lot of times when I speak with lawyers, they are worried about moving with their families. That's especially now with the pandemic. So I would say, I don't know whether you agree, that it's easier to move when you are, younger, you don't have that family commitments.
Absolutely. You should, as a junior lawyer, if that's the context.
Oh yes.
You should seize the opportunity to move.
Got it.
And because it's the dividends far outweigh, the cost.
Yes. And what advice would you give to someone thinking of moving from practice to in-house? Because you moved from practice to in-house at a rather senior PQE.
Yeah.
Right? Is there anything you would have done differently? But anyway, going back to the advice, what advice would you give to someone who's moving from practice to in-house?
I would say do things with purpose and meaning. So if you're thinking of moving away from private practice to in-house because you think the hours are better, I think that's the wrong reason to move.
Absolutely.
If you're thinking of moving away from private practice to in-house because you really like what that organization is doing, big picture, then that's a great reason. Yeah, because the practice will be relatively similar in the early months. They are hiring you for your core skill sets. And then as you settle into the company, if you want to, you may be given the opportunity to do more than that you were hired to do, which for me is the other upside of going in-house, which is you are growing your skill sets and growing your experience that way.
Okay.
So yeah, move for a real purpose, not just
Real
because
purpose.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more because a lot of times, people move because they're fed up, they're burnt out, but that's not the best time. And in fact, that's when your judgment is clouded. You're not making a career decision in line with your purpose, but more like I want out, right? And in-house is not a plan B. It shouldn't be seen as an easier life because obviously it sometimes is not.
Yes.
It's just a different set of considerations. Yeah. Okay. And if you could have a chance, John, to do a do-over, is there anything you might do differently in your career looking back? And why?
Well, I'll start with a legalistic kind of, qualifier. I mean, I have no regrets, none whatsoever. I'm very satisfied with where I am and how I got here. And as I said earlier, I in some strange way, I feel it was every step I took was destined to bring me to where I am today, right? And therefore, had I not kind of stepped out of line a little bit and explored my options and executed to them, I wouldn't be here sharing with you this. But hypothetically, if I were to do something different, maybe stay in London a little bit longer. Why? Because it probably would have sharpened, my technical skills a little bit more. But that said, I mean, moving from London to Bangkok allowed me to kind of work on deals more meaningfully, even as a junior lawyer, because in satellite offices, you get thrown into the deep end sooner.
Yes.
So there's no right or wrong, but yeah, I mean, if I were to change, maybe I'd stay in London for a couple more years.
Yeah, a couple more years. Okay. And how do you see the legal market for in-house lawyers evolving in the future? Because now you've been with Grab for coming to 5 years, and you've been in Singapore market for a while now. Do you foresee any opportunities? And, maybe for in-house lawyers out there, is there anything that you think, could be the way of the future? We have to think a bit more differently about the way we work.
Yeah, maybe I'd say two things. One is, based on what I'm seeing, I think management are beginning to realize that lawyers play a huge role in directionally kind of supporting the company. And because of that, there will be more and more opportunities for lawyers to kind of go in-house, and there are many roles within our organization you could play. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of demand. Second, I think I question how much technology can change the way in-house teams are structured and managed. I think it will play a part in terms of e-billing systems, contract management systems. It's all, that's a space that is rapidly evolving, and there definitely is a demand. Using the Grab legal team as an example, for such technology to kind of help us work smarter, and spend more time on understanding the business and supporting the business rather than on the administration of the back office stuff. I think technology will have a role to play there.
I struggle to be honest, John, because for instance, to give you an example, when LinkedIn first came out, 8-10 years ago, into the scene, I thought I was going to be out of a job, because technology, I'm going to be replaced. And a lot of lawyers, I think, are unnecessarily afraid of technology, and law tech is evolving in a very big way. So we'll see what happens. But it's just learning to embrace it as it comes, right? So anyway, now that we've heard from John the lawyer, before we wrap up the podcast, let's get personal and ask some very quick questions.
Sure.
So John, what's your morning routine like? You tell us more.
I got used to getting up early because of my son, who's now 7. So I try to get a light workout done, or I try to meditate for like 10 minutes. And then, I'm back at my desk, checking, clearing emails and getting work done.
So when you say early, what time do you wake up?
6.
6, okay.
Yeah,
And how many hours of sleep do you usually get? I'm curious.
Well, when we're busy on deals, then 5, which is bad. I try to, where possible, get 7 at least.
7.
But I think on average it's 6 then.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the reality.
Okay. And how about a favorite book? Do you have a favorite book?
Can I give you a favorite author
Sure.
instead?
Sure.
I like reading Murakami books. The way he introduces, the way he writes, and the topic he writes about kind of stretches the mind, and also lingers and asks ethical questions about how you should be, how you should think, how you should behave. And there's a lot of, by normal standards, kinky misbehavior going on in a lot of his books.
Yes.
But I think it's intentional. It's designed to make you think, which is a good read in my mind.
Yeah. Okay, I must look it up. And what about a favorite TV show or movie? I know we mentioned Ally McBeal, and that used to be my favorite TV show when I was growing up.
Okay, what am I watching now? Billions is like extremely entertaining.
I love Billions. Yes.
And it's a good mix of legal stuff as well as fundraise stuff, VC, PE stuff. Suits every now and then, just for kicks and
fun.
giggles.
Yeah. Okay, and John, if you can sum up in one sentence, what's your motto in life?
Wow. It's seize whatever opportunity comes your way, take intelligent risks, and have no regrets. Enjoy it. Enjoy life.
I can really feel that resonating. Okay, so one last question. So we've been through a lot of questions. Is there one question you wish I could have asked you and I didn't ask today?
That's a super tough one. That's a question I wish you didn't ask. No, I think we had a very kind of good conversation. Covered so many things about what it took, my journey here. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for being so candid and sharing about your journey. I personally feel like I know you even better now. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So if you'd like to get in contact with John, then please check out the notes on this episode where his contact details will be found and details of anyone mentioned on the show. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then be generous and share it with as many people as you can, rate it and review it, and follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time to find out what could be in store for us after the bar.